Hello and welcome to Cite Right Chicago. My name is Victoria Jones. I'm the Archives and Special Collections Librarian, and today I will be briefly going over how to use the Chicago citation method for your research papers. We have 4 goals today for this presentation. Number 1 is to get an understanding of the difference between author date and notes and bibliography. Both are styles that are used in Chicago, and we're going to go over the difference between the two. Number 2 is learning how to cite books, articles, newspapers, and web pages. Those are some of the most common types of citations that are used in Chicago, so we will be going over those. Number 3 is practicing to practice citing in Chicago. And then 4 is hopefully at the end of this, you will have learned to love Chicago Manual of Style as much as I do. So here we go. Some of the basics. Chicago is short for the Chicago Manual of Style. It's an American style version that was developed by and based in the University of Chicago Press. It's mostly used with the humanities, social sciences, and the arts because it is a very flexible citation guide or citation style. Other types of citations are a bit more rigid in their rules and structure, but Chicago allows for some flexibility. The actual manual has 4 different sections, 3 plus the index and the glossary. And I highly recommend that if you haven't looked at it before, that you go over it. It answers so many questions that you might have about Chicago, and it goes into really great detail and has some amazing examples. So this will just be a brief overview in this presentation, but I do recommend that you check out the citation manual, and the library does have 2 copies of it here for checkout. So why do we cite? The first reason that we cite in academic papers is to avoid plagiarism. Plagiarism is presenting someone else's ideas or work as your own, and citing allows you to give those authors credit for their ideas and the work that they did. Failing to cite and committing plagiarism can be an issue of academic integrity and can result in disciplinary action. So it's really important that you are understanding how to cite, when to cite, and where to cite, and that if you aren't sure, that you ask either a library staff member or your professor or someone maybe in the writing center to make sure that you're doing it correctly. The second reason that we cite is to give credibility to your work. Citations show that you've done your research and that your ideas have the support of other authors and researchers within the field. So it's just kind of saying, look, I had this idea, and look, these other people that I'm also citing agree with me too. So it just gives you more credibility. And number 3, it helps readers to identify sources. So if someone is reading your paper, they are probably interested in the topic that you're writing about. And so when you cite, that allows your readers to go to that source and gain more information and more context. And it can be a really great way to sort of build a bibliography or just to learn more about a topic. So the 3 key reasons: avoiding plagiarism, giving credibility to your work, and helping readers to identify sources. Next, we will be going over the difference between author date versus notes and bibliography. It's pretty simple, but I just wanted to touch base on this in case anyone ever says to use one or the other, you know exactly what people are talking about. So Chicago actually has an author date style, similar to what you'd find with APA and MLA, in that it uses a parenthetical in-text citation. It's not the most common use of Chicago, I'll be really honest with you, but it is something that you can do if you wanted to, or if your professor requested that, know that that is an option. The other and more common type of citing for Chicago is notes and bibliography. So this is predominantly used in disciplines like literature and history and the arts. And this is really, I think, the sort of the heart of Chicago, if you will. it uses endnotes and footnotes with a corresponding bibliography. And so what that means is that you'll have the superscript at the end of your sentence or your paragraph, depending on how you're styling it. And then the information that you would normally see in an in-text citation with the author, the title, the date, would be either at the bottom of the page or the end of the work. So that's how you get that information. This also allows for exposition within your footnotes or endnotes, which can sometimes be necessary, especially when you're working in the humanities or social sciences. It's sometimes a little bit of extra information is really useful. As I mentioned before, notes and bibliography is really much more common if someone's using Chicago, but I did want to just explain that there are two different versions of Chicago so that if you ever hear someone talking about author date Chicago, you understand what they're saying. The next and the main focus of this presentation will be how to cite popular or common types of materials. And this is just going to be a brief overview. Some specific instances and more detail can be found in the manual, which again, I truly recommend that you at least take a look at. So to begin with, let's look at the elements of a citation. If you've done a research paper before and you've done any type of citing before, this is going to look pretty familiar. The actual information that most citations are looking for across the board, so whether you're using APA, Chicago, MLA, AP, is usually pretty similar. It's just how it's structured that's really different. So this is specifically for a footnote, although it will be pretty similar for your bibliography, which we'll talk about. But you'll do the author's name, followed by the title, the place of publication, and the publisher, along with the year, are all going to be in parentheses. And then you'll end it with the pages used for that specific citation. So remember, this is for a footnote. This is not your bibliography. This is for a note. So it'll be first name, last name of the author, the full title at first, and then place of publication, publisher, the year of publication. So all the publication information will be in parentheses, and then the page numbers used for that particular citation. And then all of that information is separated by commas with the exception of title to publication because you have parentheses, and then you'll end it with a period. We're going to go over that a lot, but this is sort of the standard breakdown of a note in Chicago. So one big thing to keep in mind about Chicago is the difference between a full note versus a shortened note. And as you can see from the previous one, and as you can imagine with bulkier titles and multiple authors, your note can get really long. And so Chicago offers the ability to use shortened notes. So the very first time that you cite any material in your paper, you will do a full note. So you'll do the full name, the full title, all of the publication information, and the page number. And then the next time that you cite a work, you can shorten it. So you could just do last name, title, or part of the title, and the page number. So what's most commonly would be found would be like the last name, and then if the title had like a portion before the colon, and then the page number. And so as you can see, it probably won't take up more than one line. It's a lot shorter, and you still know what this person's talking about, what they're referencing, because you've already seen the full note in its entirety. So that's a really great way to sort of save space and prevent you from having like a whole page worth of notes. So if you were citing a book, for the footnote, you would include, as we saw before, the first name and the last name of the author, the title, the publication information, so that's the location, the publisher, the year, and then the pages that you use for that particular citation. And so here's an example of a full note with all that information, and then a shortened note. So remember how I mentioned you might do the last name and then the title prior to the colon, followed by the page number. And that's what we have for the shortened note. Bibliography entries are going to look very, very similar to your footnotes or your endnotes. which means it's really important that you're very careful. The biggest difference, or one of the biggest differences, is that you're going to invert the name. So instead of doing first name, last name, the bibliography, you'll do last name, first name, and then organize the bibliography by last name. And then instead of doing commas in between, you'll do a period after each element. And it's important to note that there is a period after the title here when there's not a comma after the title in the note. So just make sure you're really, really careful about your bibliography. And so you'll see that it's, instead of Jessamine Ward, it's Ward Jessamine, Men We Reaped, a memoir, period, publication information, and the year. The page numbers are not included in the bibliography, only in the notes. If it seems like a lot, you will catch on the more you do it, and it's quite similar across different formats. So we'll keep going to the different formats, and you'll see more of what I'm talking about. Now, if we're citing articles, you'll see that we're going to start off with articles exactly how we did with footnotes, or I'm sorry, with books for the footnote. You'll start with the first name, last name, and then the title of the article will be in quotations. And make sure to include your comma inside the quotation. That's a thing that you'll do throughout both your actual text of your paper and your notes. But so you'll have the article title in quotations, and then the name of the publication is italicized. Not the article title, but like the journal title will be italicized, followed by the volume number, the issue number, and then the date. And then the date will be in parentheses. Usually you can just do month, year, or sometimes it'll be season, year. So instead of, this could be winter 2015, for example. It really just depends on what language the journal has used. And then for the note, you'll do pages used. So looking at our example, this article is written by Benjamin Bagley, Loving Someone in Particular. Ethics, the journal is italicized while the article title is in quotations. This is from volume 125, number 2. And then the date, January 2015, is in parentheses. And then for articles, you'll do, after the end of the parenthesis, you'll do a colon for the page number. And then here, I've chosen to do 484-85, as in 484 to 485. That's a personal preference. That's one of the great things about Chicago, is maybe you don't like that. You want to do 44 to 485. You can, as long as you're consistent. So once you pick something, make it the same throughout your paper, unless, of course, your professor has told you something different. So for number 2, we have the shortened version of this citation. So it's just the last name, just the article title and quotations, and then followed by the page number that was used. For the bibliography, we're seeing some of the same changes that we noticed when we did the book. The name's been inverted so that we have last name, comma, first name, period. Then the article title, period. Then it'll be publication name, volume, issue number, date, just as we saw with the note, colon, page range. And this page range is the page range of the entirety of the article, not just the pages used. So that's something to keep in mind. That's a big difference between the note and the bibliography. So for the book, you don't need it. You've used the entirety of the book, but in the bibliography, it's a reference to the entirety of the material that you used. So the entire page range of the article, the entirety of the book, that's why it's like that. And then you'll end everything with a period. Now going on to online articles. And so these will be nearly identical to the articles that we just looked at. This is focusing more on a print article, as in you went to the library and got a physical article. And then an online article would be, if you found it on an online journal or however you get your online articles. But it'll be nearly exactly the same in that your note will be first name, last name, article title and quotations, italicized, publication name, volume, comma, issue number, date and parentheses, pages used, period. But then you will follow that up with a link. So in this particular instance, it's got a DOI. You may have noticed this when you're doing research. If you haven't, I do ask that you keep an eye out for it now. A lot of journals will include this thing called a DOI. It's more permanent than what a link is, and it's a specific number for that specific article. And so if this is an option given to you when you're looking at, say, JSTOR, for example, use the DOI instead of the link. If the DOI is not an option, then you can use the link. Chicago does specifically request the DOI over the link because of the issue of permanency. But do your best, find what you can, and put the link after the page number before the period. The idea of this is that if I was reading your paper and I was going back and I'm like, wow, I really want to read this article, how do I get to it? That I could click your link or copy and paste this link and get right to that item. So that's the plan. And the shortened form is similar to the print article, and then it's last name, article title, and page number. You don't have to keep including the link. The bibliography, just like with the print version, the name is inverted once again. Last name, comma, first name, followed by the article title in quotations, period, publication name, volume, issue number, and then the date in parentheses, colon, page range, and then of course you'll include the link as well. Newspapers are very similar to articles in that it looks very similar. You're going to start out with a note in the same way as we have been with the first name, last name of the author, followed by the article, or if it's a column, the column title in quotations. The name of the newspaper will be in italics, and then you'll include the city and state in parentheses. In some cases, that's really obvious. Like if you're citing the New York Times, obviously it's in New York City. But if you have something that is maybe a little bit less well known or doesn't say the place, the location in the title, like the Commercial Dispatch, it's really helpful to have the city and state information. You'll use the abbreviated date. I imagine that this is for space, but this is what Chicago has requested. So instead of February, it's just FEB 19-2020. And then after that, you'll have the shortened citation, which is the last name, use, and then the article title in quotations. That's really all you have to do for a newspaper. You can't, if there's page numbers available, you would also include the page number, but a lot of newspapers don't always have that information. So just do your best. The bibliography, again, we have this inverted last name, comma, first name. The article title or column title will be in quotations with a period. The newspaper name will be in italics with the city and state, and then you'll include the abbreviated month, day, year. Online newspapers, again, just like the difference between print articles and online articles and print newspapers to online newspapers, very, very similar. The only real difference is that you'll be including the link after the date. Same with the bibliography. The only real difference is that you'll be including the link after the date. If you are citing an online newspaper or print newspaper and there is not an author name, you'll just start right at the article title. So say we didn't know who this author was, we would start it with local students win DAR awards. That's just go to the next available information that you have. So citing web pages is, again, like we just mentioned, cite with the best information that you have. If you can find an author of the article that you're citing, or who is running the website, if it's something like that, do your best to include that information. And it may take a little bit of digging. But if you can't find that, then you'll start with the title of the web page. So it's the particular page that you're on. And then it will be followed by the name of the website will be in italics and followed by the date of publication. Or if there's no publication date, which is common on web pages, then you would do an access date. So you'd say accessed on November 10th, 2021, or whenever you access that information. And then it'll be followed by the link to that information. So this is just a CNN web page, which could be argued to be an article, but you can still see what I've done is that it's author name, first and last. The page title is in quotations. The website is italicized. The date is there. And then the link is followed afterwards. Bibliography is going to look very similar in that it's inverted name, last name, first name, title of the web page, name of the website or the publishing organization, followed by the publication date, the access date, whatever you have, and the URL. And if you are a history student, especially, or if you're not a history student and you're using archival items, I do hope that you might be popping in to say hello in the archive. There's also a way to cite archival items. A lot of archives will give suggested citations, but not always. So if you don't have access to that information, here is sort of a standard that you can use. And so you'll use either the item name. So a lot of items in archives will be named, but if not, do your best to describe it. Luckily for this example, the description is also the title. And so it's a letter from Christine Smith to Pauline Smith. And then this is the date of the item. So this item was written on August 12th, 1938. And then you'll include as much information about where you found it as possible. So you'll have the box number and the folder number. This also has included the collection number. Sometimes you'll have access to that, sometimes you won't. If you don't have it, just skip to the next available information that you do have. The idea is that if I saw this in your paper, I could backtrack and trace your steps to finding the specific information. So you'll also include the name of the collection and the name of the repository, and then the location of the repository. So if I was trying to track this item down, I'd be like, okay, I've got to go to Columbus, Mississippi. I have to find the Beulah Culbertson Archives and Special Collections. I need to request this specific collection, these papers, and then I need box 611. It's in the 27th folder, and then this is the name of the item that I'm looking for. So that's for the note. And then you could similarly do a shortened note. I would probably do something like the letter, like the title. So letter from Christine Smith to Pauline Smith with the date, and then maybe end it there. For the bibliography, if you've only used one item from that collection in your paper, in your research, then your bibliography item would be very similar to the note. So you'd use the creator or the author of that item. So in this case, it's a letter from Christine Smith. So it's Smith, Christine, then the title of the item. And so you'll see that this is a little bit different because we didn't include the author for the note, but we do for the bibliography. So you'll have the title of the item, letter from Christine Smith, Pauline Smith, period, date of the item, period, box number, folder number. And then the collection and the repository location. If you are referencing multiple items from a collection, then you'll cite the collection as a whole. So you won't need this first part of the information. You'll just need the Ellard Murphy Pilgrim Smith family papers. This is the collection number again, and then the repository name and the repository location. So if you're looking at multiple items in that collection instead of just one, or if you're citing multiple items from that collection instead of just one. Yeah, so that was kind of all for our examples, but there are a few quirks of Chicago that I would like to go over before we sort of wrap up. And that's the difference between direct quotes and block quotes. So Chicago manual is quite specific about this. So if you're quoting something in your paper and it's fewer than 5 lines of text or less than 100 words, then it's fine to make it a direct quote. It can be in line, and you'll make sure to end your punctuation before the final quotation mark, but then your superscript will go afterwards. So I think this is sort of a divergence from other citation styles that you may be familiar with. So if you have a quotation, like you can kind of see in the example, the last word is life, then you'll do period, quotation mark, and then the superscript for the footnote or endnote. Now, if you have a block quote is when you have not a ton, but much more text that you're quoting from. And so it always starts on a new line and it'll be indented from the rest of the text. Usually it's indented by about half an inch or a quarter inch, but that is really something that I would touch base with your professor on to make sure that that's right. I think the standard is about the half inch mark that you'll see on your word processor. And usually these are longer quotes and they have more than 100 words or they're more than 2 paragraphs. Now you don't need to go and count every single word, but you do want to kind of keep an eye on the length of the quotes that you're using, just so that you know whether you want to use a direct quote or a block quote. This is another thing that Chicago is very, very specific about, in that Chicago does require the use of the Oxford comma. So the Oxford comma is when you're listing something out, you include a comma after each item, including the item that comes right before the word and. So in this example, we invited the rhinoceri, comma, Washington, comma, and Lincoln, versus we invited the rhinoceri, comma, Washington, and Lincoln. And this is truly for clarity. I'm a huge fan of the Oxford comma. I think everybody should be using the Oxford comma. So be sure to include that, especially if you're not as used to or familiar with using Chicago style. Another thing I would like to talk about is Imid. So whether or not you use Imid is really going to be up to your professor. As of the 17th edition of Chicago Manual Style, which is the most recent edition, Chicago has stated that it is not preferred to use this term anymore, but it has not been outright banned, which sounds so serious. But Imid is a way, it's even shorter version of the shortened citations that we discussed. So you'll have the first time you cite something, you have the first full citation, and then the second time you might have a shortened citation, and then maybe you're citing the same work in back to back to back in multiple sentences. Instead of repeating that shortened citation, Imid is the option to just do Imid, IBID, which means in the same place, and then you do common page number period. And so that has been a practice of Chicago style for a very long time. It seems that the manual is shifting away from that in coming years. But I also wanted to talk about it in case you are reading other people's works, especially if it's older or if that's just what they prefer. and you see this term, you will know what it means. And that's just saying it's using the same thing, the same citation that was previously cited. So whether or not you can use that in your work, you should ask your professor first. But that is what it means, that is what it's for, and it is and still an option as of the 17th edition. So how do you even add footnotes and endnotes to your work? It really will depend on what word processor that you're using. So I've given an example in both Word and Google Docs. I feel like those are the two most common things that are used. So for Word, it's actually pretty straightforward. You'll go to the References tab and you can click either Insert Footnote or Insert Endnote, and boom, there you go. Some of you may have used the Citations and Bibliography section in References in Word and insert your citations that way. That's definitely an option. Personally, it's not my preferred way of doing it. I've found that doing the Insert Footnote or Insert Endnote is a little bit less likely to make me have to go back and fix errors, but that's a personal preference. You need to figure out what works best for you. For Google Docs, what you'll do is you'll go to the Insert tab, and then you can do Control-Alt-F and do a footnote. Despite much searching, I have yet to find a great way to do endnotes in Google Docs. So if you're doing endnotes, it might just be that you need to use a different word processor, or maybe I'm missing something. And if that's the case, please shoot me an email or leave a comment. I would love to know. I thought the next thing that we could do is a little bit of practice. You do not have to do this part, but it is really good to sort of get used to using Chicago in a low stakes way. So the first thing we have is I have 3 different types of materials listed and cited for you. And I want you to look at them, and based on what we've gone over, what type of materials do you think each one of these are? I'll give a little bit of a pause in case you'd like to try and shout at the screen, or you can fast forward a little bit and you'll get the answers. Okay, so the first one is a book, right? Because it's a pretty standard citation. It's got the first name. It's a bibliography citation, right, of a book. And it's got the last name, first name of the author, and then the first name, last name of the second author. We didn't really talk about multiple authors since this was just an overview, but I will be giving you some additional resources to learn how to do that for what you have referenced in your work. The second item is a footnote, and you can tell that because of the order that the names are in. And it's an article, and it looks like it's an online article. And so, and it's from JSTOR. Apparently the DOI was not available. And so at least I found a stable link, which is the next step. If you can't get a DOI, try a stable link or a permalink. And if you can't get that, then just do what you can. And the last one is actually a tweet. It's the first tweet sent by Jack Dorsey back in 2006, because you can cite social media, and Chicago does have a clear way to cite social media posts, including but not limited to Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, all of that, which I think is really fun. The next thing is I'm going to again pause and give you some time to try and do either a note or a bibliography citation for this book. It's called Loyal Daughters, and I've got the cover for you to pull information from, as well as, in addition to, it's not the actual inside of the book, but it's the information that you'll need, and that's from the catalog listing of the book. So I'm going to pause for a little bit here. Feel free to pause the video if you feel you need a little bit of extra time. Okay, I hope you've had enough time, or at least paused and managed to get the citation for this down. And so here are some of the possible answers that you could have put. So here is, say this is your initial note that you're citing this book from. So it's got the author's names and it's in their first name, last name style, with the title in italics with the publication information in parentheses, followed by a page number. If you wanted to do a shortened note, this is one version of how you could do it. It's just their names, Pichelle and Pichelle, loyal daughters, that should be in italics, but we're just practicing. And then the page number that was used. In addition, if you could also just do Pichelle and Pichelle with the page number, or if you're citing it back to back, you could use Imid. All of these are acceptable answers for a shortened citation. And then, of course, if you're doing a bibliography, you'll want to invert the first name that's there. It's Pichelle, Bridget Smith, and then Stephen Robert Pichelle. So you'll do the name in proper order for the second author, but for the first author, it is going to be inverted. And then make sure you include your periods and not commas in the bibliography. The title is in italics, followed by the publication information. And that's how you'd cite that book. If you have some time and you would like to practice and try citing information, now is a good time to again pause the presentation or pause the video and to use the library database or look and see what you have around you or pull or work on something from your paper and try and make sure that it's formatted correctly or try putting it in a correct format. It could be anything, a book, an article, a finding aid, a newspaper, archival items, whatever you have, whatever you'd like to practice on. Now is a really great time to do that. So now you've learned some quick ways on how to cite Chicago, but maybe you're in the process of doing it and you get stuck. If you need help, you can just ask. You can ask Athena. The library and library staff are always available via chat, text, and you can email the archive directly. You're more than welcome to email library@muw.edu. But the people in the archive, we are historians and we love Chicago, so we're always more than happy to help. You can schedule an appointment. So if you go to the library's main webpage, or if you go to this link, it's libreserves.muw.edu/appointments. You can book an appointment with me, Rick Jones, and we'll help you, or I'll help you anyway, go through your paper and look at citations. We also have a research guide. It's the Chicago Research Guide that I will include links and information to in the description. So that shows how to cite a book with multiple authors, that has different types of materials that I didn't cover in this presentation, and just goes a little bit more in depth, and it has a little bit more information and links to other sources as well. It's a really great thing to have on deck while you're writing your paper. And then, of course, I cannot emphasize this enough, you should really check out the Chicago Manual. If you have a really specific question, or you're really not sure what to do, or you have more stylistic questions, go ahead, pull up the Chicago Manual, stop by the library, or if you have a question, we can go pull it if you're not local, to try and help you answer those questions. That's really where you're going to get the most in-depth information from Chicago. And I would not be me if I was not blatantly plugging our social media. So if you are not already, what are you doing? Be sure to follow the library on Twitter and the library and archives on Facebook and Instagram. We usually share when we're going to do programs like this so that you know what's going on. And then this will be on our Facebook, our YouTube page, which you probably know if you're there. But if this got linked from somewhere else, know that we do also have a YouTube. It's under Fant Memorial Library. And we have a lot of great content and how to do different library things. If you ever have any questions, please go ahead and email me. This is my direct work email. It's vjones3@muw.edu. You can give me a call at the archive, you can text the library, and of course, you can use Chat Athena. So I hope that this has been helpful, giving you a brief overview of Chicago Manual of Style. And lastly, I do hope that you have learned to love Chicago Manual of Style. I think it's a really great citation method. I love using notes. I think they're a great way to sort of keep your text streamlined, but keeping all of your information. And I hope that you learn to love it as much as we do. Please be sure to give us to do an evaluation form. We really do look at these, and it helps us improve our presentations and improve the work that we do for students down the road. I will also try and remember to include this in the description box below. So thank you so much and have a great day.